So it says I'm recording. Okay, so welcome to today's class, and we're going to be starting lying down with a relaxation. Then we'll do a number of practices lying down that are really about loosening the hips and the spine. And then we'll do some standing practices that are about loosening the shoulders and the spine, and some balancing and strengthening practices. So when you're lying down in Shavasana, I've got two mats so that I can tilt one for the close-up stuff and then the other one for the standing stuff. So when you're lying in Shavasana, you might choose to rest with your knees bent and your feet flat to support your back. You might choose to put a cushion under your knees so you've got a bit of support, or you might be happy with your legs outstretched. So see what suits you best. And then your arms could be by your side in this position, or you might choose to rest them on your tummy or your chest, or even have them by your side, palms down. So again, work out what feels most comfortable for your body this morning. And just take a little bit of time to adjust. So checking your head's in line with your spine. Checking your shoulders are comfortable. As I mentioned, arms by the side or against the body. Checking the position of your legs enables your lower back to be relaxed. Just take all the time you need to make those adjustments. And while you get settled, I'm actually going to sit to guide the relaxation because it's easier to speak than when lying down. So now you've settled your position, just tuning into your breathing. And we're not making any change to the way we're breathing, we're just tuning into what the breath is doing of its own accord. And it might be that your breath is moving swiftly or slowly. It might be high in the chest or down in the belly. Just tune into what your breath is doing right now. Observe its rhythm, how it feels. And then without very much effort, just very gently encourage your out-breath to stretch just a little. Breathing in and out through the nose, but with the intention of allowing the out-breath to lengthen a little. And the more that you can empty the lungs of air, the more space there is for fresh breath. So just by lengthening the out-breath, you may find that the in-breath naturally wants to lengthen. But we're not trying to breathe in more deeply, we're just gently encouraging the out-breath to stretch and allowing the breath to be as it is, other than that. So for a few moments, that sense of extending the out-breath, breathing out and in through the nose. And as you're breathing out, notice if there's any tension held in the body, maybe the brow or the jaw, the shoulders or the tummy, anywhere that you might find that you're gripping a little bit. And as you breathe out, just encourage softening anywhere that you feel that you are holding on. And if you're not aware of any particular tension areas, just imagine the whole body softening as you exhale. Sense that as you breathe out, you can allow the body to become heavier. So with each out-breath, there's a sense of settling and softening. And if you find that your mind becomes busy or sleepy, as you breathe out, imagine you can let go of any busy thoughts or any sleepiness. And as you breathe in, feel that you're replenishing yourself with fresh energy and vitality. So the out breath, releasing the breath, settling the body, settling the mind. And the in breath, replenishing and refreshing. Just continuing with that intention as you tune into the breath and rest the body for a few more moments. And as you're resting there in stillness and steadiness, just pausing, maybe listening to the sounds that you can hear, whatever's going on in the room or outside the room. When we tune into the body, the breath, and any of our senses, it brings us very much into the present moment. All of those things only exist in the here and now. And yoga is about bringing ourselves into that state of presence, here and now. So preparing to move from that point of stillness, and start really gently, maybe wriggling fingers or toes, and then loosening out ankles or wrists, gradually shaking or stretching the arms and legs. And you might choose to take your arms up overhead and reach out through your fingertips and have a long full body stretch. You might want to bring your knees into your chest for a hug and a rock from side to side. So just take a few moments to do any movements that feel helpful to you. And then if you end up resting with your knees bent, your feet flat, and stretch one leg up into the air. And as you stretch the leg into the air, keep the pelvis and the lower back really firm on the mat. Lengthen out through the back of the knee as much as is comfortable. It doesn't have to be fully stretched, but do flex the foot so the heel presses to the ceiling, and that encourages lengthening through the muscles in the back of the leg. Just hold there for a moment, see how it feels, gauge how much to stretch or how much to keep the bend in the knee, and then place the foot back down and lift the other leg. Really easy for the lifting leg to lift the pelvis, but try and keep the lower back pelvis settled. Back of the knee fully stretched or a little softness there, but the heel flexed so the sole of the foot turns towards the sky. And then bend the knee, bring the foot back down. Repeating that movement with the breath, exhaling as you stretch and inhaling as you bend. And just continue on with that, alternating legs, working with the slow breath that you've established. And a variation of this is to actually start with the knees the knees to the chest and the feet off the floor, and to do exactly the same movement, but with the feet remaining lifted. And for some people, this might be more comfortable. For other people, returning the foot to the floor might be more comfortable. It's not that one is better than another, it's just options to make it feel better for your body. So carrying on, exhaling to stretch, inhaling to bend, keeping it nice and slow. We're lubricating the knee joints. We're lengthening the muscles down the backs of the legs. You might find that one leg feels different to the other. So notice if your legs are feeling the same or different to each other. Yoga being a process of really tuning into yourself and finding out where your body and breath and mind are at in any given moment. Just continue for 1 or 2 more till you've worked equally with both legs. And then when you feel balanced, place the feet back down and take any movements or stretches that feel useful. Good, so moving on to a pelvic rock. It's quite useful for the pelvic rock to actually place the hands on the lower belly. And when we're resting in neutral with the knees bent, there should be a little bit of space between the lower back and the ground. But if we engage the belly, we flatten that space into the ground and we engage the abdominal muscles and very slightly tilt the tailbone towards the ceiling. And then when we release the belly, we come back to the neutral position. And we're just doing that with the breath. So the out breath is the squeeze of the tummy, flattening the back, tilting the tailbone. And the in breath is releasing back to neutral, and allow the belly to expand as you breathe in. And just do that gentle, simple, quite minimal movement, but keep the breath extended and nice and slow. The breath that you established in the relaxation. So you've got not far to go, but plenty of time to get there. And as you move, when we're exhaling and contracting the belly, we're trying to suck and draw down with the abdominal muscles so that they create a massaging effect on the inner organs, particularly the digestive system. And then when we release, we allow the belly to expand as the breath enters the body. So just continue with that for a few more moments. It's really about getting that lower back loosened as well. So noticing if your lower back is tender or comfortable this morning. And then we will move into the bridge pose with quite a specific breath pattern. You might choose just to watch for a round before you join in. So the breath pattern, we rest on the ground and breathe in, allowing the belly to expand. We use the pelvic tilt and then we lift the pelvis and hips off the ground. It might be that you lift just a little bit, or you might keep on going so that your weight transfers to the back of the shoulders. So that happens on the out breath. When we reach the bridge pose, we pause and breathe in. So expanding the belly, and then we exhale to lower. When we reach the bottom, we let the leg muscles relax and take a breath in. And then continuing in that way, so the exhale travels the hips up to the sky. The inhale pauses there. The exhale, the hips lower. And the next in-breath, pausing at the bottom. And just continue with that. So takes 2 breaths to do the full movement. You know how high to lift, whatever's comfortable for your back. You might choose to do a repetition and then rest. You might choose to keep going on each set of 2 breaths. And just continue with that. I'm going to sit up so that I can say a couple more things that happen regularly in the bridge pose. So sometimes when we lift our hips, the knees want to move apart, but if you can try and keep the thighs parallel, it's more strengthening for the leg muscles. Sometimes we end up pushing with just the heels or the toes. We want to keep the whole sole of the foot really flat on the ground. And I prefer to have my palms down by my side so I can support myself with my hands and my shoulders. But you might find a different positions more comfortable with your arms. And then if you're really comfortable in the bridge pose, the next time you reach the bridge, just pause there. You could choose to leave the arms by your sides, take them out at shoulder height, lift them up overhead. Or some people like the variation where you squeeze the shoulders together and link the hands. If you're staying in the pose, just keep the feet firm, thighs parallel, buttocks and belly strong, nice deep breaths. And stay for the point for as long as you feel that you give yourself a bit of a challenge without strain or pain, leaving enough energy and coming down on an out breath. When you're back down to the mat, you might find that some of the leg extensions we did previously are useful to lengthen out the backs of the knees. So just take your time to complete that round of bridge and stretch as you need to. And then come back to a still place to rest. So moving on to a spinal twist, you keep the feet apart and the knees bent, and then just take the knees over to one side. I quite like my arms out at shoulder height, but you might choose a different place for your arms. The knees go one way, then back to the center, and then over to the other side. The breath coordination is to inhale, knees in the middle, exhale, knees to the side. And it's important not just to drop the weight of the legs, but to keep the legs very connected to the core. So as you exhale, you're engaging the belly. And that might mean the legs don't go quite so far, but it means it's more active and connected through the core. So you're going to get that same effect of massaging the inner organs and strengthening the abdominal wall. So using the out breath to squeeze the tummy as the legs go from side to side. You may choose to stay looking up, or you may choose for the head to roll the opposite way to the knees, if your neck is happy with that. And a variation that you might choose to make it a stronger practice is to lift the feet off the ground and to carry the knees from side to side without touching the floor. If you have any back or neck issues, you might prefer to keep the feet on the ground. And this one, you really need to use that out breath and the squeeze of the tummy to control the legs. Otherwise, they sort of drop from side to side and actually pull on the spine rather than strengthening the belly and the back. So you might choose to do a few with the feet lifted and a few with the feet on the ground. Be guided by your experience in your body and what feels right for you today. We'll just continue for one or two more rounds till you feel you've worked equally to both sides. And when you feel that you're balanced, come back to the center and rest. Once you're resting, bring the feet in off the ground, knees in towards the chest. You can hold the backs of the thighs or the knees or the shins, knees together or apart, and just have a little rock or even a circular motion around that lower back area. And the next practice will be with the knees in this position, so whichever version of that is most comfortable to you. And then we're going to hug the knees as close to us as we can, which might mean keeping the knees together or separating them, whatever makes sense to you, but drawing the knees as close to the body as possible. And then moving the knees directly forwards and away from you, just to the point where you're still holding the knees and the elbows straighten. And then repeat that with the breath. So the out breath is hugging the knees into the chest. The in breath is moving the knees away, making a little bit of space. As with the other practices, as you hug, scoop down and in with the belly. And when you're inhaling and the knees move away, let the belly expand. The stronger version of the practice is to add a lift of the head. So as you hug the knees and scoop the belly and breathe out, the nose lifts towards the knees. And as the knees move forwards, the breath comes in, the head releases to the ground. If there's any hint of neck strain or shoulder pain, then leave the head resting on the ground. But if you're happy with lifting, then add that variation. So regardless of whether you lift the head, this practice gives a good stretch to the lower back, that gentle massaging effect for the belly, the scooping of the abdominals as you breathe out, creating strength in the core And that variation that just makes it a little bit more challenging to lift the head. You might choose to do one with the head lifted, one without, alternate it in that way. As ever, be guided by your body. Just continue on with this hugging practice. When we move, it's tempting to move quickly, but see if you can still tune into that spacious breath you established in the relaxation and work with that pace. Exhaling to lift and squeeze, inhaling to release. And just do one more round of whichever version you're working with, and then come to rest. You might rest with the knees hugging in. You might feel you need a stretch, whatever feels useful to you. So we do a couple of stretches for the hips. The first stretch, there's different variations, and it will really depend on what's happening in your hips, particularly if you've had a hip replacement. Just be really mindful of what suits you. So you can cross your ankle to your opposite thigh, so you end up with this shape and a space here, or you can cross one leg over the other so that the thighs are touching each other and the knees are one on top of each other. And in either of those positions, you might find that the other foot being on the floor already gives you enough stretch in the hip. But also in either position, you can lift the underneath foot off the floor to use that underneath leg to press the top leg closer towards your torso. And that is viable in either of those positions. So you can experiment with them all and see which suits you best. And then you can choose to leave the arms relaxed, or you can choose to use the hands to draw the knees even closer if you want to deepen the stretch. Again, you know what your limit is and where's the best place to stop. With this open version, you can reach through the gap and take hold of the underneath leg to draw the legs in towards you. And another slight variation is to just very slightly shift the legs over to the left or the right, and that will change the sensation of the stretch in the buttock. And then you might find a place where it's particularly tight and you just want to rest there. So experiment with your position and then find a place to rest in stillness. And once you rest in stillness, focus on the unwinding that you can do with the out breath. So when you're breathing out, check, is your face or shoulders tense? Are your toes or fingers tensed up? Is there anywhere that's gripping? And particularly inside of the hip, it's easy to grip in sort of reaction to the stretch. But try to soften right inside the hip. And each out breath is that chance to unwind and release. When you're breathing in, imagine the place where you're experiencing the stretch expanding and opening. So the out breath softening and releasing, the in breath making more space where there's tightness. And then uncross the legs, have a shake or a stretch or any movement that feels useful. Pause for a moment in a symmetrical position. And then prepare for the other side. Are you going to cross ankle to knee? Or are you going to cross knee to knee? Do you want the underneath foot on the ground or lifted? And it might be that one hip is completely different to the other, so you need to approach the stretch in a different way that's appropriate for this other hip. So listen to your body and follow what it's telling you. You can experiment with a little shift to the left or the right with the legs once you've found a position. You can hold or not. And then once you've wriggled and found a place that feels like it's okay for you to stay, then just pause. Notice where you're gripping. Use the out breath to unwind. Use the out breath to soften inside of the hips and allow the legs to fold. And then whenever you're breathing in, imagine breathing space into any tight spots. So just by remaining in the posture, without really moving, but just moving the breath and the awareness, we're deepening the pose with minimal effort. So just staying for a few more moments, softening, settling, relaxing into that posture. And then gently release, uncross the legs, shake, stretch, do whatever feels useful. And having stretched the back of the hips, we will then stretch the front of the hips. So if you bring one knee in towards you, you can hold the thigh or the knee or the shin, and then very gently stretch the other leg down the mat. And it might be that for you, stretching not very far is enough, or it might be that you can fully straighten the leg. See how your body responds. And then as we rest there, imagine the outstretched leg, imagine that heel being drawn away down your mat, so the leg's as long as possible. And then the lifted leg, imagine the inside of the hips softening, so the knee releases towards the chest even more. It's not really like you're pulling and forcing, you're just encouraging softening, and it might just inch closer. And you can make this a more challenging posture by lifting the head, if that's appropriate for you, but otherwise just leave the head resting on the mat and focus on the lifted knee softening towards the chest and the outstretched leg lengthening away from you, breathing deeply. Again, use the out breath for softening, unwinding, the in breath for bringing space into the restricted areas. And then come back to knees bent, feet flat. Just pause in that symmetrical position for a moment. And then lift your other knee in. Tentatively stretch your other leg out, seeing where is the place for you, for your hip and your knee and your back. Once you reach your posture, then focus on the breath. Out breath, softening. In breath, creating space and length. And just holding for a few breaths while you allow the pose to settle in the body. Nice, long, expansive breaths. Continually scanning the body, unwinding where you can, making space where you can. And then coming back to symmetry, knees bent, feet flat, or if you prefer, you might want to stretch the legs out or hug the knees to the chest. Just take a couple of moments to do anything that's useful to you. And then our next practice will be kneeling. It's quite good when you've been lying down for some time, just to go really gently when you come to seated. So it might be that you rest on one side for a few moments before you lift yourself up. And if you come up this way, it's good to use the hands to get you up. Or you might like to tuck the hands under the lower back and push through the hands as you come up that way. So just coming up. And if you've got sensitive knees, you might choose to put a blanket under your knees. If you've got feet that don't rest very comfortably on the ground, you might choose to put a cushion or blanket underneath your ankles. We're heading for the table pose with the palms on the ground and the knees on the ground. So just take a few moments to get yourself into that table pose. There's a few variations for hands. If your wrists are happy, palms down on the ground is fine. If your wrists aren't so happy, you could have a cushion under your palms and your fingers off the edge, so it's not quite such a strong flexion. Or you might choose to make this position with the fingertips against the palms, the thumbs pointing out, and that keeps the wrist from flexion. So that's a variation if your wrists aren't very comfortable, flexed. Hands are below shoulders, knees are below hips, head's in line with the spine, tummy's lightly lifted so that you're supporting the back. And then we make the cat pose by scooping in with the belly, allowing the tailbone to tuck under and the head to release between the arms. And then the cow pose, stretching the other way, tailbone lifts, belly and chest stretch and the chin lifts. Keep going with that movement, squeezing the tummy as the back rounds and stretching the tummy as the back arches and the chin lifts. As you're squeezing, breathing out, scooping the belly inwards. And as you're arching, breathing in. Again, finding that slow, spacious breath that you've worked with throughout. And using that breath to pace the movement nice and slow and steady. Exhaling to curve, head lowers. And inhaling to arch as the chin lifts. And just keep going with this for a few moments. When you're arching, make sure you keep a little bit of space in the back of the neck rather than dropping the head too far back. And when you're curving, really scoop in with the belly to encourage that stretch through the back of the spine. Lovely. So we're going to, you can keep going with this version, or a slightly different version that just moves to stretch through the spine in a little bit of a different way, is to, once you're in the cat pose with the head lowered, is to shift the weight backwards towards the knees, and then as you travel into the cow pose, to shift the weight forwards into the hands. So this makes the rolling cat, and it just gives a little bit more stretch to the shoulders. It moves the stretch through the spine and back. And it just gives it a slightly different feeling. And you can do the rolling cat and cow really minimally, or you can do the rolling cat and cow almost sitting on your heels and then coming really far forwards. So you know what suits your body in terms of how much to shift the weight back and forwards, or whether you just want to stick with the regular cat and cow. Nice long deep breaths. Exhale, head lowers. Inhale, chin lifts. Rolling it forwards and backwards, or just remaining static. And this is really about finding fluidity through the spine. Gently stretching without force or strain, but possibly with repetition you might find that you deepen into each stretch. But it's just seeing where you're at today. Moving in a way that feels like it loosens and warms and mobilizes and makes the spine feel more fluid. So either the static version or the rolling version, whichever suits you best, or a combination of the two. And then we're going to head into the child or the puppy pose. So puppy pose, elbows are down and wide, forehead is resting on the ground. This is good if your knees or hips aren't so happy folding. If your knees and hips are happy folding, you can sit down on your heels with your knees together or apart. And in this position, you can have the arms forwards by your head or by your sides. And if having the head low doesn't feel good, you can make two fists, one on top of the other, and rest your forehead on your fists. Or put your forearms on the ground and have your head higher. So you know what's appropriate for you. Once you've settled into that position, just focus on the breath. Out breath, imagine softening towards the ground in the position that you're in. And the in breath, imagine breathing space into the tight spots, wherever they might be for you in this posture. And just take a few moments resting there. Long, deep breaths. Having another moment of pause and stillness. And then from where you are, we're going to come up. So you probably want to put your hands down so you can lift your head really slowly. You might want to stretch out the backs of the legs. You might want to do a couple of cat or cows. We're going to come up to standing. You may choose just to step and come up that way, or you might like the downward dog or a forward bend. So you might choose to tuck your toes, lift your hips, have a stretch, and then gradually come up. So take your time to move into a standing position in any way that works for you, looking after your back and lifting your head slowly so you don't create dizziness. Just doing a check that, yeah, I can be seen, that's good. Okay, so we'll do some standing practices. The first standing practice that we'll do is Tadasana. So Tadasana is the mountain pose. It's the base standing posture. And if you just shift your weight around on your feet as if you were making wine with grapes. So really sort of squishing down through the soles of the feet. And you can wriggle the toes. You can circle the ankles. Just try different movements to bring your awareness into the soles of your feet and your toes and your ankles. And then plant the feet on the ground. So there's an inch or two between the feet, toes are pointing forwards. Spread the toes as wide as feels comfortable. Settle the heels on the ground. Imagine you're making really firm footprints on your mat. Stretch your legs so that the legs are strong and steady, but avoid sort of locking into the knee too strongly and being too strong in the kneecap. So there's still a little bit of give at the knees. Take your awareness to your pelvis and hips and lower back, and imagine that area is really heavy. You can even have a like shake of your tail feathers, and imagine that lower back tailbone area is really heavy. So from hips to heels, you're being anchored down to the ground. And then imagine a little bit of space at the waist between the top of the hips and the bottom of the ribs. So you're creating length through the belly and the back. Allow that lengthening to travel up through the spine and the neck, as if the crown of the head were being held up to the sky by a silver thread. So hips to heels, there's a sense of anchoring, settling, grounded, connected to the earth. And hips to head, there's a sense of length and lightness, connection to the sky. And there's this two-way pull through the body. Allow the shoulders to soften away from the ears, the arms just dangle, neck, face, jaw are loose and easy. So you can be strong and steady and tall, but long and light and lifted at the same time. And just pausing there for a couple of moments. Focusing on the breath, see if you can find that long, spacious breath that you established at the beginning of the class. Notice I often stand more in one foot than the other, so notice if you're even in both feet. Notice if you're even from front to back of this, through the soles of the feet. Keep checking the knees don't lock, the hands and arms are soft, the breath is free. And then with that steady base, we're going to begin to move. We're going to roll the shoulders, so one shoulder and then the other, sort of like a swimming action. If your shoulders are sore, you might make it really minimal and gentle. If your shoulders are quite comfortable, you might make it quite a big movement. That actually means that the torso begins to turn from side to side. For me, I find actually I want to bend my knees to keep my legs really strong and steady at the base. And then that gives me the stability to be more fluid through the torso as I roll my shoulders. But you might find that you're better off with straight legs. And for these standing practices that we're doing for the next little while, if you find your legs get tired, you might choose to grab a chair and sit down, because we're working with the upper body You could be seated whilst you're doing this. But if you're happy to keep standing, it's good to keep standing for leg strength. So just rolling the shoulders backwards, one then the other. The movement as big or small as suits you. Arms and hands quite dangly. Maybe a bend in the knees for stability. And then pause at a convenient place to start rolling the shoulders forwards. And so if I twist my torso a little bit from side to side, I feel like I'm stretching in this area behind the shoulder blades. But it's going to depend on how your shoulders feel as to how much you add that little bit of twist in the torso. Notice what the breath's doing as you move the ribs and the torso. Maybe it speeds up a little bit. Just allow the breath to flow freely without trying to coordinate with the movement. And then come to rest and just give your shoulders a wriggle, your arms a shake, your legs and feet a shake. And then come back to Tadasana, legs steady, hips to heels releasing to the earth, hips to head rising to the sky. And then we're going to lift the right arm. So if you mirror what I'm doing, so lifting the right arm. And if your shoulder is comfortable, you might find it's pleasant to have your arm by your ear. But if your shoulder feels a bit restricted, you might want your arm further out to the side. Imagine lengthening from the hip through the ribs and the armpit all the way up to the fingertips, but avoid making the hand rigid, so there's still softness through the fingers. And then bend the knees, but keep that sense of length through that hand and arm. Let this hand, the left hand, be heavy, and just gradually bend to the left side. So the weight of the hand and the head doesn't have to be a very big side bend, just to begin to feel a bit more opening through this right side and a bit of contraction through the left side. So just have a play around there. Let the left hand get heavy. Let the right hand, imagine there's like a helium balloon and the right hand's being lifted to the sky, and then a heavy stone in the left hand releasing you down to the earth. And this right side is having a stretch, opening the ribs, stretching the lung. Imagine breathing deeply into that right side. Allow the head to go as far as is comfortable for the neck. And then return to center, relax the arms, maybe roll the shoulders, whatever feels useful. And then preparing on the other side, so that left hand floats up. Start by thinking of space from left hip to armpit to fingertips, lengthening up to the sky, but keeping softness in the hand. The right hand gets heavier, the head goes over to the right side. You've got this two-way pull down to the earth and up to the sky. Imagining that helium balloon on that left hand, a heavy stone in the right hand, opening up through that left side. Space in the ribs, space in the waist, breathing deeply. And keeping firm in the belly, so you're drawing the belly in and back to support the spine as you side bend. Returning to the center, relax the arms, roll the shoulders. And then we'll move in and out of those two positions with the breath. So we'll inhale here, and we'll exhale back to the center. Inhale, stretch the other arm, and exhale back to the center. And just continue on. You might choose to keep the knees straight as you inhale and exhale, side and center. You might choose to bend the knees as you inhale and exhale, side and center. And we've got this dual thing going on where we want to support the belly, but we also want to breathe in. So it's actually said to create intra-abdominal pressure to try and engage the core whilst inhaling. And the intra-abdominal pressure is said to be good for all the inner organs. So even though you're breathing in and expanding, keep supported in the belly. Inhaling as you side bend and exhaling as you center. Just working at your pace with your breath, making the movement as big or small as suits you. And do one or two more till you finish. from the left side, or sorry, the left arm up, but bending to the right side. And then when you're balanced, come back to the center, stretch, shake, and do whatever is useful. So then stepping the feet a little bit wider apart. Again, for this, I prefer to have a soft bend in my knees. Placing the hands onto the shoulders. Depending on your shoulders, it might be that your elbows are low or they might be out at shoulder height. Keeping the hips and the knees facing forwards and turning just from the waist to twist the upper body. Come back to the center and over to the other side. Add breath awareness, so the inhale is in the center and the exhale is as you twist. And just do that quite slowly with your breath, inhale, center, exhale, twist. And notice if you want to sort of take your hips with you or shift your feet, try to keep really symmetrical and still from hips down, and just work using the abdominal muscles to twist the spine. Doesn't really matter how far you go. You're probably just sort of looking from one corner of the room to the other. If it's comfortable, you might choose to look a bit further around behind you, but don't be in a hurry to try and look behind you. Just exhale and see where you get to. So no forcing or straining. Inhaling center, exhaling as you twist, and as you exhale and twist, really scoop in the belly. And then if it feels pleasant, you could stop with the breath coordination and just speed up the movement. If you do this, you need to keep the feet really firm on the ground and the legs really strong so that you're anchored from hips to heels, giving you the stability from which to make the twist happen. So you can experiment with the speed, still keep the breath nice and free, but if you're going quickly, don't try and breathe on every twist. Just let the breath come and go freely and the movement be unconnected. What I sometimes find when I speed up is I want to twist each way as I breathe in and twist each way as I breathe out, but you'll find a pattern that works for you. If it makes you dizzy, go back to the slow version. And if you need to rest in any other way, feel free. So either the slow or the quick version. If you're doing the quick version, rewind to the slow version. Gently strengthening the arms as well to keep them up here, but if they get too tired, bring them back down. And then eventually come back to the center, release the arms, give the arms and the legs a shake, and have a moment to pause. Good. So this next practice is about strengthening the legs, testing the balance, and also working with the spine. I'll show you sideways what the position of the spine is. So the feet are an inch or so apart. We bend the knees, and we make a circular shape with the arms as if you were holding like a hula hoop. And then we just look down towards the hands. So from the sort of shoulder blade area, the upper back and the neck are curving, but we're not taking the whole body forwards. It's just the upper body, and this part, this belly, lower back area stays upright. And then from there, we stretch the knees and stretch the arms and lift the arms up into a high V. And then we rewind to that place where we're holding the hula hoop and curving the neck and the upper back. And then we stretch the knees and lift the arms. And this works with the breath, so you're breathing out as you're relaxing the head forwards, and you're breathing in as you stretch up. And we're not back bending, we're just coming to upright, because if you want at this point, you can rise up onto the balls of the feet and make it a balancing pose. So you would curve the back, bend the knees, and then stretch the knees, lift the arms and rise up into the balls of the feet. If it feels too unsteady to add that rise, then just keep the heels on the ground. The breath coordinates by exhaling as you look down and inhaling as you lengthen up. Just carrying on with your own breath. That's it, lovely. So nice, slow. It's like you're flying, but very, very slowly. I think, isn't it owls that have really long wings, and their wings move really, really slowly. So imagine a bird with long wings that doesn't need to flap that quickly, gliding through the air. And when you're bending the knees, looking down, breathing out, scoop in the belly. And when you're rising up, nice deep breath in as the arms lift. Now this one can be made really aerobic by keeping the breath coordination but moving more quickly, which means you sort of push the breath out through the mouth. So if that feels appropriate to you, have a go at speeding it up, breathing through the mouth as you exhale, and then inhaling through the nose. But if that just feels like it's dizzy or unsteady, stick with the slow breath that you established before. You might alternate between them. Be really guided by your body. And then the next time that you're looking down, just come from there back to Tadasana and take a moment to steady yourself. Those sort of long, deep breaths, whether you're doing them slowly or quickly, can make us feel slightly lightheaded, which isn't a problem as long as you just take the time to settle and let it assimilate. So just pausing there, feet firm, tailbone heavy, spine long and light, face and shoulders relaxed, breath nice and free. Just allow that all to settle. So then for a practice that's about strengthening the legs, feet apart, toes pointing to the corners, the distance between your feet, whatever feels comfortable and steady to you. Put the hands on the hips and just bend the knees. Great. And as you bend the knees, keep the inner thighs strong so the knees go in the same direction as the toes. Really easy for the knees to roll in, but try and keep strong in the inner thighs so the knees and toes point in the same direction. Also really easy for the pelvis to either swing back or forwards and the shoulders to go back. What we want to try and do is keep, as we bend and stretch, just do a few rounds. You could put your hands front and back of the hips or on the hips, just to have the sense that your shoulders and hips go straight down and straight up without any shifting back or forwards. And that strengthens the inner thighs as well. The depth you go to depends on your hips and knees, so you could just go a little bit or quite low if it's comfortable. The lower you go, the more likely you are to make the spine go out of line, so just be mindful of that. And then come up from this next round, give the legs a shake. And we'll practice the arm position that goes with this posture, which is to make right angles at the armpits and elbows, to have the palm in line with the forearm, space between the fingers without rigidity. And this position is supposed to be broad in the upper chest, but also broad in the upper back. So we're not squeezing or contracting, but the elbows go straight out to the sides. And then we lift in and out of this position by lifting and lowering the arms. And we combine that with the leg position. So feet wide, toes to the corners, lift up the arms. So you start like a star shape, and then you squat into the leg position and draw the elbows down. The breath is inhaling as we lift and exhaling as we squat. So coming back to that slow, spacious breath you established at the beginning. Exhale, squat, inhale, lift. Just work at your own pace. Keep going with the repetitions unless they feel like they're not suiting you today, in which case rest. If your arms get tired before your legs, you might choose to rest the arms and carry on with the legs. If the opposite happens, you might choose to rest the legs and carry on with the arms. So there's always ways of adapting the practices to suit where you are at on any given day. If you're quite happy with the practice, we're going to do one hold. So the next time you reach the squat, really plant the feet on the ground, engage the inner thighs, lengthen the spine, broaden the chest and the upper back, support the elbows, soften the fingers. And if you want the fullest full version of the pose, you add the lion pose, which is to go sticking out the tongue and opening the eyes really wide. So you could try that a few times if it appeals, otherwise just remaining there. See if you can smile even though your legs might be feeling challenged, your arms might be feeling challenged. Challenge is good, strain and pain is too much. So gauge for yourself how long to hold. Make sure the breath is flowing freely. And stop with arms or legs or both when you reach the moment that's appropriate for you. A little bit of shaking in the legs shows that the muscles are building strength. But if we find that we're sort of holding the breath and the body's becoming tense, we've definitely stayed for too long. So when you've had enough, just release legs and arms, give everything a shake. It can be really nice after that practice to do a wide leg forward bend, so you could have the feet apart and the knees bent and just dangle the body forwards. And then it can be good to sort of shift the weight from leg to leg or to loosen the neck and the shoulders and the arms and just have a little sort of wriggle and relax down there in the forward bend. So take a few moments. If all the way down is too much for you, you might just choose to put the hands on the knees and have a sort of stretch there. And then wherever you are, just gently make your way back to upright, bending the knees, rolling through the spine, supporting the belly so the back is supported as you come up. And bring the feet together and give the arms and legs a shake. Good. So I'm a big fan of balance practices that also travel. So we're sort of challenging ourselves in a variety of different ways at the same time. So this is a traveling balance practice. You might want to watch it before you join in. You'll need to move up and down your mat. And so just check that you've got room in the space where you are. And all that we're doing is taking a step and then lifting the other knee up. It might be just a little lift just off the ground, or it might be lifting high. And at the same time, we lift the opposite arm. It doesn't really matter what shape or how high, but just lifting up through the arm. And then placing the lifted foot down, switching the balance to the other side. And for me, my mat and my step length means that I can do about 4 before I have to travel backwards. So the rest of the challenge is to, once you get to the front of your mat, is to start repeating but stepping back behind you. Slightly more difficult because we're stepping into the unknown because we can't see behind us, but good for our proprioceptive awareness. So it's quite a slow motion. It's essentially a walking action, but you're just exaggerating it by lifting the knee and lifting the arm. Like I say, for me, it's 4 forwards and 4 backwards. For you, it might be less or more, depending on your mat and your leg length. So you can imagine kind of walking on the moon, really slow motion, giant walks. I quite like to work with the breath. So the inhale is the lift of the hand and the knee, and the exhale is the placing of the foot on the floor. So that gives me a rhythm, inhaling up and exhaling down. But you might just be finding that thinking about balancing is enough without trying to coordinate the breath. So you can not work with the breath coordination. Something that's useful is to find a spot directly out ahead of you. Keep the gaze fixed on that spot, but whilst keeping the eyes relaxed and blinking still. And make sure that as you lift the knee, it doesn't cause the body to tilt backwards. So we don't want to lift so high that we put the spine out of line. We want to keep the spine really upright. The other thing that might happen as you lift the knee is it might shift you sideways. So just be aware of not sort of tilting the pelvis side to side. Keep the pelvis really neutral. If you're not sure, you could try a couple with the hands on the hips so that you're aware of keeping your pelvis really neutral. So traveling balance, this slow, exaggerated walking action. Traveling forwards on your mat and then traveling backwards on your mat. Keeping the pelvis really neutral, keeping the spine really tall, the breath nice and smooth. Lifting just as high as feels like it tests your balance without causing any issues in your hips. And if you're finding that you've done more than enough, rest at any point. And you might find it's easy to balance on one foot and not the other, so notice if that's the case for you today. Balance always changes from week to week and class to class. And just do one or two more till you feel like you've worked equally with both legs, and then come back to Tadasana and take a moment to stand steady. And once in Tadasana, feet anchored to the ground, tailbone heavy, spine long and tall, shoulders and face soft. Letting the breath settle, letting the body settle after the different practices that we've just done. We're just going to finish the standing practice with 3 breaths where there's an option to hum as you breathe out. So I'll show you one round. It would be to inhale, lifting the arms, and then to exhale as if you were sort of pushing down something through the air. And as you're exhaling to and obviously we all breathe at different rates, so you're just moving the hands down and breathing out in time with your own breath rhythm and adding that hum if you wish. With the hum, humming is said to be soothing for the nervous system, so I kind of imagine like I'm bathing myself in that soothing sound. If that appeals to you, you can have that in mind. So feet anchored, just crown of the head rising, and just 3 rounds, inhaling as you lift the arms. And resting in Tadasana when you get to the end of the 3rd breath. Just take a moment to pause. And then we will come back down to the mat for the final relaxation. So grab socks, layers, blankets, cushions, whatever you need to make yourself comfortable, a sip of tea or water. as you lie back down into Shavasana, you might choose to hug the knees or take a twist or anything that you feel is useful to your body. Figuring out whether you're most relaxed with the knees bent and the feet flat. You can have heels wide and knees touching to support the legs, support each other. Or a pillow under the knees or stretched legs, arms by the side, hands against the body, whatever makes sense to you. And take all the time you need to get settled and comfortable. And then the relaxation is in two parts. The first part, we progressively tense and release different muscle groups to help them soften and settle. And the second part, just follow the words in the mind and send your awareness to each different body part in turn, sending a message from mind to body to relax. So starting with the tensing and releasing, begin with the right foot and leg, squeeze, tense, tighten and grip, and then exhale and soften. Squeeze, tense, tighten and grip your other foot and leg. And exhale to release and soften. Squeeze the buttocks tightly so that the hips raise a little bit as both buttocks squeeze together. And then exhale to release. Press the backs of the shoulders into the ground so the chest expands a little. And then exhale, release. Draw your shoulders towards your ears so you're squeezing into your neck. Slide away as you exhale and release. Make two fists, tense, tighten and grip both arms. And exhale, release. Screw up your face so your eyes and mouth tightly close. Exhale, release. And then lift the eyebrows, stretch the eyes, open the mouth, and if you like, stick out the tongue as you exhale into lion. And you could repeat that a couple more times if it feels enjoyable to you. And then just making any adjustments. So repositioning your body, stretching your face, making sure you're warm and comfortable. And then following the words in your mind, the body can stay still, but the mind moves so that you're tuning in to relaxing each body part in turn. I relax my toes, the soles of my feet, my heels. I relax my ankles, my calves, my shins. I relax my knees, my thighs, my buttocks and hips. I breathe deeply, my legs are relaxing. I breathe deeply, my legs are relaxed. I relax my lower back, my middle back, and my upper back. I relax my abdomen and internal organs. I relax my chest, my heart, my lungs. I breathe deeply, my torso is relaxing. I breathe deeply, my torso is relaxed. I relax my fingers, my palms, my wrists. I relax my lower arms, my elbows, my upper arms. I relax my shoulder blades and collarbone. I breathe deeply, my arms are relaxing. I breathe deeply, my arms are relaxed. I relax my neck, my throat, my jaw. I relax my mouth, my cheeks, my ears. I relax my nose, my eyes, my eyebrows. I relax my forehead, my scalp, my brain. I breathe deeply, my head and face are relaxing. I breathe deeply, my head and face are relaxed. My whole body is relaxing. My whole body is relaxed. And just resting there for a few moments, allowing the body to settle and the breath just to rise and fall in a comfortable rhythm. So bringing your attention to your breath, just observing the gentle rise and fall of your breath as it comes and goes, gradually encouraging the out breath to lengthen, so there's a space for a fuller, deeper in-breath. As you lengthen and deepen the breath, travel your awareness back down into the body. When you feel ready, begin to move with just little movements of the fingers or the toes, and gradually bigger movements through the ankles and wrists and arms and legs. Taking all the time you need, maybe choosing to stretch the arms overhead and reach out through the toes, a full body stretch, or maybe choosing to hug the knees into the chest. You might want to practice palming, where you rub the hands vigorously and you can cup the warmed hands over the eyes or over a tender body part that feels like it wants a bit of care. Yawning, stretching, whatever's useful. When you feel that you might be ready to sit, gently bring yourself back to an upright position. And you could sit cross-legged on the floor or any other position on the floor, or move yourself up to a chair if there's one nearby. And once you have made it to upright, just settle the hips wherever you're seated, lengthen up through your spine, just like we do in Tadasana. Rest the hands on the lap somewhere, and we'll just finish with a lift of the arms on an in-breath, and we'll bring the palms into the heart center on the out-breath. So inhaling as you lift up, and then exhale, bring the palms together and back down in front of the heart center. This mudra is said to bring balance and harmony, so I hope you're feeling stretched and eased and more balanced at the end of this yoga session. Thank you very much.